to the Commerce Secretary, and you would lead the U.S. International Trade Administration. Experts consider the president's tariffs the largest tax increase in over half a century, a tax increase that will increase costs for families by about $3,800 a year. So, Mr. Kimmitt, first question, are tariffs taxes?
Thank you for the question. Respectfully, I think that oversimplifies what a tariff accomplishes, and I think tariffs have multiple strategic uses, including leveling the playing field against unfair trade practices, and that's what the Enforcement and Compliance Division does to offset dumping and countervailing duties.
Well, I'm going to cut you off now just because my time is limited. It is disappointing that you won't admit that tariff increases are tax increases. That's how they're going to feel to families who are expected to pay an additional $3,800 a year for groceries and other essentials. The official definition of tariffs from the International Trade Administration, which you would lead if you are confirmed, says on its website that tariffs are taxes. Specifically, it says that, quote, a tariff or duty is a tax levied by governments on the value, including freight and insurance, of imported products. So is that official definition now wrong just because President Trump has decided to impose an across-the-board national sales tax?
Respectfully, Senator, I have not seen the specific statement or the context of it.
Well, so just to save us both time here, without objection, this is a hard copy of the website of the agency that you're about to lead, and it is what I quoted from, and I'd like this introduced into the record.
So ordered.
Mr. Kies, you are nominated to be the Assistant Treasury Secretary for Tax Policy. Will giving tax breaks to billionaires increase or decrease the national debt?
So it's kind of difficult to answer that question because I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but if you're referring to whether extending the existing tax provisions.
I'm just asking a very simple question. If you give tax breaks to billionaires, so they're not going to pay as much taxes now, does that increase or decrease the national debt?
So in order to be able to provide a sound answer to that, I'd really need to understand the specifics of what proposal you're referring to.
Well, I can tell you how the CBO would score it, right? But look, the Congressional Budget Office, our official nonpartisan scorekeeper, says that the Republican tax plan would add $37 trillion to the national debt. That's the CBO. That's our nonpartisan scoring entity. That's more debt in the next 30 years than our country has taken on in the 249 years since its founding. So I'm disappointed in the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank my colleague. For the senators that are here, it goes Whitehouse, Cassidy, Langford. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much. Mr. Kies, welcome. I don't have time this morning to get into your role with regard to the Caterpillar company and the investigation into that. But can I get your assurance that when I ask questions for the record regarding your role in that episode, you will provide truthful and complete answers?
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Let me give you an example, a hypothetical, if you don't mind. Company A and Company B compete with each other in the marketplace. Company A is an American corporation with its offices in America, and it pays taxes in America pursuant to American tax law. Company B, its competitor, opens up an offshore affiliate, which may actually be a place where work is done, with jobs moving from the U.S. to that offshore location, or it may be just a corporate shell to which profits are recorded so that it appears that profits that come from American consumers are actually overseas profits. And those overseas profits then get taxed at a lower rate. So Company B, by virtue of its offshoring scheme, is able to undercut Company A because it has a lower tax bill at the end of the day from the result of that offshore scheme. Is that good tax policy, and is that good for America?
So Senator, the hypothetical that you've described, which you did say was hypothetical.
But it's actually real. We're not making stuff up. It happens, so please proceed.
The change in 2017 to the international tax provisions eliminated what was previously deferral, which was the fact that a offshore subsidiary, if it earned income, whether in a low tax jurisdiction or not, was not currently taxed on it. Deferral was ended by the 2017 Act. So the hypothetical that you're describing, you may be referring to the fact that when the U.S. currently taxes income earned by offshore subsidiaries, there may be a lower tax rate because of provisions that were also included in the 2017 Act. But the 2017 Act actually made what you've described less attractive because prior to the 2017
But it still
Act,
happens, does it not? As
Well,
the chairman, as the ranking member's investigation has just shown with Pfizer, for instance, hiding potentially billions of dollars in overseas profits to reduce its tax burden by millions and providing them unfair advantage both against drug companies that do not take advantage of that offshore tax scheme and small companies that don't have the resources to set up complicated offshore tax avoidance schemes. How does that make sense? Isn't that something that, just as a matter of decency and proper economic policy, we should try to eliminate?
well, and again, Senator Whitehouse, you have described a rather, I don't want to say simple tax situation, but
Yeah, it's pretty simple. They're cheating. It's simple as hell.
No, they're actually very complicated situations which require significant analysis.
They're complicated machinations that it takes to get through to set up the offshore tax scheme. That's why words like scheme are appropriate. But at the end of the day, it's a simple proposition. You fake putting profits offshore, you reduce your tax burden, you save money, and you cheat both the American taxpayer and your competitors. Let me close with this quote. The hedge fund guys didn't build this country. These are guys that shift paper around and they get lucky. They make a fortune, they pay no tax. It's ridiculous. The hedge fund guys are getting away with murder. They're making a tremendous amount of money. They have to pay taxes. This was a comment that relates to getting rid of the carried interest exception. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, it's a statement by someone. I'm not sure who.
I'll tell you who. I'll give you a hint. Donald Trump.
Okay, interesting. And Donald Trump has raised the issue of whether or not they should revisit carried interest. And my job, if I'm confirmed, will be to carry out and implement the policies of the president and the secretary.
You sure about that? Not to be the voice for the carried interest, special interest?
I'm not just sure, I'm 100% confident of that.
Okay, well, events will prove it one way or the other. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cassidy.
Mr. Kies, knowing that you're going to carry out, but also you'll have some influence on the practicality of carrying out. Senator Hassan and I have just introduced the Red Tape Reduction Act. And what this addresses is that in 2021, with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, the threshold to receive information regarding on the 1099-K was reduced from $20K to $600 on a single transaction. Now, practically, that seems difficult to, and it's affecting my constituents. It affects everybody's constituents. So can you give, when you're giving best advice on the practicality of executing the law, would you agree, and I'm begging the answer, as you speak to whomever you're speaking to, that this one's not very practical and perhaps we should increase that threshold?
Clearly, events have demonstrated that that particular change has been very difficult for people to handle and is of questionable judgment. So it's definitely something that needs to be rethought. So I would commend both you and your colleague for raising the issue and saying that's something we need to turn our attention to.
Yeah. knowing again that you will have some input on policy, even though ultimately you are the executioner, so to speak. The U.S. fiscal policy, right now, it is estimated that we'll get to 106% of debt to GDP ratio, which is our historic high. We'll get to that point in 2027. If you just look at, we've got 36 trillion in debt now, we're going to add another 21 trillion just on autopilot. And if we're not careful, we'll add another 10 trillion on top of that. You've thought a lot about this. Others say that's not sustainable. What are your thoughts about that?
Clearly, the level of debt we have is extremely troubling, and it raises significant questions about sustainability on a long-term basis, particularly when you look at the entitlement programs, which are facing significant challenges in the near future, both Medicare and Social Security. So Congress needs...
By challenges, you mean the trust funds, just to elucidate. The challenges are that the trust funds are going insolvent, at which point, by law, those benefits will be cut by roughly 20 to 25%.
In the case of the Social Security Trust Fund, I think the current projection is that the trust fund goes insolvent in 2033, at which point incoming taxes will be the only resources available to pay benefits, which would be roughly in the 70-75% range. Yes, that is a significant concern, and not just for me, but for her, my granddaughter.
No, your granddaughter's going to pay the bill. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
She should be complaining right now, so I'm glad that she's talking up. So that's perfect.
She seems to be okay with it right now, but I don't think she will be later.
Mr. Kimmitt, I'll accept that you accept that this is unsustainable and that we need to do something about it. We should do something about it sooner, not later. Again, in your advisory position on policy. Is that a fair summary of what you would say?
I think he was referring to me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kies.
No, it's perfectly okay. Yeah, I think I am an advisor. I'm not a policymaker, but clearly I will be part of the process of advising on issues like this, and I don't think any person can look at the picture ahead and not see that there are some significant challenges that need to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Mr. Kimmitt, turns out we have some mutual friends, and so anyway, I pass on their hellos. Won't influence my vote. It was already a yes, because in an interview you came across extremely well. But let me speak. When the president announces tariffs, he spoke about other countries producing in a dirty fashion, if you will, offshoring their pollution, but onshoring the decreased manufacturing costs to our disadvantage, if you follow what I just said. Now, we have something we call the foreign pollution fee, which I'll also point out that the American First Policy Institute now supports, in which we would put a fee on goods coming from other countries roughly equal to what they're not paying to control their air pollution, but that which we do pay. And this is a pro-manufacturing. We just updated the foreign pollution fee legislation, assigning key roles to the departments under your jurisdiction, specifically enforcement compliance. So let me just ask, again, begging an answer, do you support incorporating pollution intensity or carbon benchmarking into a trade enforcement as a tool to counter unfair trade practices by non-market economies, particularly in high emission sectors like steel, cement, and aluminum, where these foreign polluters are using the lack of compliance with environmental laws to undercut cleaner U.S. producers?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I enjoyed our meeting as well and enjoyed discussing this with you. And I believe certainly that the President has mentioned that low environmental regulations in other markets are a non-tariff barrier, and certainly I see it as a trade issue in the role for which I've been nominated, and certainly leveling the playing field so that other countries that don't meet the high standards of the United States don't gain an unfair advantage, and then the of course, related environmental benefits.
We're going to have to move on to Senator Langford.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Pleased that you're going through this process. You both have incredibly difficult tasks that you've been asked by the President to be able to do. You have great resumes to be able to do it and great backgrounds for this, so I appreciate you stepping up. It is a tremendous sacrifice for your families to be able to do this, so just from the people of Oklahoma, I wanted to say thank you for going through the process on this, because it's really important. I do want to make two quick side comments, because it has been interesting to me the last week or so to hear all the conversation about tariffs, and I'm not a big fan of tariffs. Tariffs are a good negotiating policy to me to be able to try to get down non-tariff barriers and other trade barriers that are out there. So it's a great negotiating piece, but at the end of the day, I want to try to get tariffs as low as we possibly can. But it is interesting to me that a number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that have talked about tariffs right now, when the tariffs that were put in place under the first Trump administration, President Biden kept all of them and apparently thought they were a good idea and had lots of opportunity to be able to change those, but instead he agreed with them. And that has been an interesting rewrite of history of late on this, but I'm grateful that we've got folks that are engaging, trying to negotiate. Mr. Kimmitt, I do have a question, though, about how we're going to deal with some of the negotiations. I've got a lot of companies in Oklahoma that they deal with Chinese or Turkish or Indian or other challenges that they have where they're producing a product, but then other entities will then dump product into the United States at a much cheaper rate, often subsidized internationally, and they dump it into our market, and it drives down the benefit for American companies or drives them out of business entirely, and they're trying to survive it. The challenge is, if you're a really big corporation, you can fight that. If you're a small to mid-sized company and foreign actors are dumping, we have anti-dumping laws and rules on it, but it costs those smaller companies millions of dollars in litigation, years of time to be able to work through it, and they've got to be able to actually get the documents from a foreign company to be able to prove that the foreign company is actually dumping in. There's just a lot of barriers in this and a lot of bureaucracy. My question is, when we can clearly see, and you're a small to mid-sized company, you can clearly see there's dumping, how do we decrease the bureaucracy, decrease the cost, speed up the process so we can hold foreign entities accountable and have American companies that are standing up for their own rights and know that an administration is standing up on their behalf?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I agree. If confirmed, I would be honored to oversee the Enforcement and Compliance Division at ITA, which plays a vital role in countering dumping and countervailing duties. I think it's important that that unit has the resources they need to process these matters quickly, to bring meaningful relief to U.S. industries. And certainly I am aware that there is legislation that's being contemplated. The Leveling the Playing Field Act, I think, touches on this, and I would absolutely welcome engagement with you, your team, and this committee on bringing more efficiency to that process to bring quicker relief to small and medium-sized businesses in particular.
Well, it'd be extremely helpful. We're glad to be able to partner with you on this. This matters to the entire country, every small to medium-sized business. Quite frankly, your giant corporations, they'd love to have some help on it as well, so it's not so much legal cost, and they can actually get their moment to be able to actually get it resolved. But small to medium-sized companies especially, this is a huge issue. The other issue is just foreign entities deliberately mislabeling products where they're coming in, using a different code, all the different things they're doing, combining packaging in to try to hide what they're doing, so they're not paying duties coming in. Once it's actually discovered, though it may have just absolutely crushed an American company in the process because they've undercut them, the penalty seems to be just back paying the duties, but the American company is still crushed in the process on it. So all those jobs were lost, all the benefit of it to the United States was lost. If they win, the American taxpayer still wins back the duties, but the American worker does not. How do we fix that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think we certainly, if confirmed, I would work with CBP to address that issue on the front end, to bring stronger enforcement to prevent that from happening, but absolutely would look at the circumvention authorities and all legal authorities that could bring the relief needed, particularly to a damaged U.S. industry. And again, I would welcome the opportunity to work with you, the committee, your staff, to think of creative legislative solutions to that problem.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate both of your help in this. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's about 70 countries that are all knocking on America's door right now saying we're ready to negotiate. I would tell you my farmers and ranchers, my manufacturers, all of them are eager for that because they've been blocked out of markets all over the world, and they are eager to be able to get a balanced, level playing field so they can get a chance to be able to compete and stop having countries get a chance to be able to block them out from selling their goods and products there. So appreciate all the work that you're planning to be able to do on it. Look forward to voting for you.
Just very quickly, and then I'm going to go to Senator Warren, but all the tariffs I've talked about are new Trump tariffs. And in fact, we just got something indicating that the White House has raised the China tariff to 145%. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2017, Donald Trump gave $2 trillion in tax cuts, mostly to billionaires and billionaire corporations, and now he's back for round two, this time a whopping $7 trillion in tax breaks for his rich donors. Now, Mr. Kies, you've been a corporate lobbyist for nearly 30 years, successfully arranging tax breaks for Wall Street, for big tech, for big oil, and for big pharma. You've helped them all. And if confirmed as the top tax official at the Treasury Department, you will play a big role in handing out more tax cuts, including tax cuts to your former clients. So I just want to run through how this would work. Mr. Kies, you've lobbied for Microsoft for years. Microsoft and other big tech companies are now demanding tax breaks to incentivize research that they would do anyway. But the real kicker is they want those tax breaks, called R&D expensing, to be retroactive, incentivizing them to make research decisions they made years ago. And Republicans have said, sure, why not? Mr. Kies, do you know how much your client, Microsoft, stands to gain from just this one tax break?
No, Senator Warren.
Well, if the Trump administration delivers what tech lobbyists are clamoring for, Microsoft would get $11 billion to incentivize investments it made years ago. That's from Microsoft's own annual reports, by the way. That is nearly as much as the federal government spends in an entire year on childcare for all of our babies. One company, your client, $11 billion. So let's try another one, Mr. Kies. You've also lobbied on behalf of Pfizer, one of the biggest drug companies out there. President Trump has proposed slashing the tax rate for corporations even further from 21% to 15%. Mr. Kies, do you know how much your client Pfizer stands to gain from cutting the corporate tax rate to 15%?
Okay, Senator Warren, Pfizer is not my client. I closed my business on March 14th. None of those companies are my client. My client.
I'm sorry, your former client.
Okay, former
Pfizer,
client.
the one you lobbied for.
And Pfizer was a client over 10 years ago?
Do you know how much they stand to make?
No.
$4 billion from the Trump corporate tax cut. But there is more. The Republicans in Congress will set out the general rules for this tax giveaway. But your office at the Treasury Department will write the rules to implement those laws. When that happens, lobbyists will line up around the block to ask you for even more tax loopholes, which you know about firsthand because you did exactly that after the first Trump tax giveaway. Now, you've committed not to work on matters involving your clients or your former clients for only 1 year. That means on day 366, while you are still in your job, you can go right back to handing out loopholes that could boost the bottom lines of Microsoft or Pfizer or any other of your former and future clients. Mr. Kies, the American people would like to know that when you draw a government paycheck, you'll be working just for them, not for your past and future clients. So will you commit to recusing yourself from matters that would affect the financial interests of your former clients for the entire time that you are in office?
So Senator Warren, you and I had a very polite discussion about this when we met, and I advised you at that time, which is what I will tell you in public. I will comply with the terms of the ethics letter, which was written by career experts on ethics. And I would also reference you to the Bloomberg article today in which Scott Amy, the general counsel of the Project on Government Oversight, said the following: this is someone, me, who is taking government ethics very seriously.
Very seriously.
And was
I
making
appreciate that, but I'm
attempts.
running out of time here.
Well, I would encourage you to read the article.
I will take this as a no. And the fact that you say it's okay with the Trump administration that on day 366, you will be handing out tax loopholes to clients that you took in millions of dollars from and that you've made no pledge not to go back and make them your clients again in the future, that may be okay with the Trump administration. I don't think it's okay with the American people. Donald Trump cares about one group of people and one group of people only, himself and his billionaire friends. So it's no surprise that he has nominated a highly paid corporate tax lobbyist to run tax policy for the American people. We need a government that works for working people, not just massive corporations, their CEOs and their lobbyists. And that's what's going to happen under Mr. Kies' watch. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barrasso.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. It was good to visit with both of you earlier. Congratulations on the nominations. I was just on the floor of the Senate noting the headlines that inflation's down. Lowest this past month from the time of COVID. So we're very encouraged by the Treasury Department and the work you're going to do. And I'd like to just visit a little bit about restoring tax fairness for Wyoming businesses, because as you see in Wisconsin and we see in Idaho, we're concerned about those things from our small family businesses. And President Trump is bringing back tax fairness for American job creators. We believe that. He was elected for that purpose. His administration's already taken action to end the weaponization of federal agencies against American businesses. For folks back home, this change couldn't come soon enough. Throughout the Biden administration time, our small businesses were plagued by reckless attacks from the Treasury Department, the IRS. For example, last year, Biden's Treasury Department launched a new audit initiative explicitly targeting family businesses and partnerships. They said they were closing loopholes. We view it a direct attack of small businesses, and what they really meant, squeezing billions from law-abiding taxpayers. They wanted to hire, 86,000 new IRS agents, and they say they're going to make money by spending all of that money. Well, the only way you do that is shaking down people that are obeying the law. What they did, basically, they buried Wyoming businesses in red tape, burdensome regulations, and all without congressional approval. Secretary Yellen, when she was Secretary of the Treasury, claimed that businesses were engaged in, as she said, high-end tax abuse. No evidence, just came up with that phrase, probably poll tested it. Look, family farms, ranches, Main Street businesses all across my home state of Wyoming were caught in the crosshairs. They found themselves facing complex audits meant for multinational corporations. Our small businesses couldn't afford expensive lawyers to fight these attacks. So, I ask both of you, and we'll start with Mr. Kimmitt. Confirmed, how are you going to prevent the Treasury Department from targeting family businesses with burdensome regulations that go way beyond congressional intent?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I think with respect to my role in trade, I certainly support a tariff strategy that aligns with lower taxes and lower regulation and unleashing American energy to bring relief to American citizens. And so absolutely look forward to working with Treasury colleagues to bring that to fruition.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Mr. Kies?
Absolutely, Senator Barrasso. Individual taxpayers are the backbone of our federal revenue base. As I pointed out earlier, total revenues in 2024 were $4.9 trillion. Individuals and payroll taxes, which are paid by individuals, represented $4.1 trillion of that, or 84% of all federal revenues. It is absolutely essential that we treat individual taxpayers fairly, provide them sound guidance, follow the Supreme Court's recent decision that directs all federal agencies to put out the best interpretation, not just a reasonable interpretation of a statute. The Treasury Department, assuming I'm confirmed in my role of implementing IRS or tax provisions through regulation, will follow that religiously.
I want to ask you, follow up with you. If I could ask you about retirement security policy. Americans deserve security and dignity in their retirement years. If confirmed, you'll oversee the Treasury office that develops and implements tax policies related to retirement plans. You're well experienced in the area. In Wyoming, about 2/3 of our workforce spends their careers with more than 70,000 small businesses in the state. That's kind of how our economy is in the state. Our small businesses, they're the backbone of our economy and also the national economy. They face unique challenges in providing retirement benefits to their employees. The administration's the burdens and the costs of offering retirement plans sometimes have been obstacles for our job creators in Wyoming and across the country. So recent bipartisan legislation has made important strides in addressing these challenges. We must do more to ensure employees of our small businesses can build the kind of savings that they're going to need for a secure retirement. So if confirmed, how are you going to help reduce the burdens on small businesses that that really do want to help their employees save for retirement.
So, Senator Barrasso, since the very first time I served in government, which was on the Ways and Means Committee in '81, and then again at the Joint Committee, I worked on numerous provisions affecting our defined benefit and defined contribution plans. I'm very keenly aware of the fact that these can be unduly complex, and our role at Treasury is to make these provisions work as smoothly and efficiently as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, both of you, to the committee. I want to just follow up briefly on line of questioning from Senator Lankford. Mr. Kimmitt, you referred to the Leveling the Playing Field Act of 2.0, which Senator Young is leading. I'm the Democratic lead, and I'm sorry Senator Lankford has left the room because we would welcome him to join our bill. And we'll submit a question for the record about that bill and your interest in working with us on that bill. Mr. Kies, I wanted to ask you, about child care. So the cost of child care is crushing working families in this country. In Minnesota, the average cost of care for one infant is nearly $2,000 a month, as much as a mortgage payment, $2,000 a month. And this is a problem, of course, all over the country. According to the Economic Policy Institute, in 17 states and the District of Columbia, the cost of infant care exceeds rent. So my question for you is this, related to the Trump tax law of 2017. Is there anything in extending that law that you see that would do anything to help families offset the cost of child care or other expenses? I don't see that there's anything new there.
So not necessarily anything new, but allowing provisions to expire that currently benefit middle-income families would make it even more difficult for them to pay child care expenses. And one of the things we discussed earlier was the importance of the standard deduction, which if we don't extend it, it will reduce the benefits of the standard deduction from $34,000
Yep.
for a family of four to $23,000.
So I'm in favor of tax cuts for middle-class people, but the reality is that this bill would, most of the benefits would go to the wealthiest folks and big corporations. And so my question is, do you think that there could be room in this Republican bill to help help cover some of the costs of child care? I mean, obviously, if there were things in the bill that were helping to lower child care costs would be lower. I mean, there's, the environment as it exists under the tax law of the Trump administration is where those child care costs are so expensive.
So, Senator, just to be clear, the standard deduction, which benefits 90% of it, goes to middle-income families, and so it's quite important.
And I'm not saying it isn't. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it isn't important. What I'm saying is that, is there anything, does the administration, to your knowledge, have any plan to do anything to lower child care costs for American families?
So, Senator Smith, I have not been part of the Treasury Department. I am not a consultant to the Treasury Department. I've had no role in tax policy discussions with anybody at Treasury Department or White House, and won't unless I'm confirmed. So I'm really not privy to any information that could answer that.
Well, I'm not aware of anything that the administration is planning to lower costs for families. This is a significant drag on the economy. Estimates are that it's $122 billion per year in lost earnings and productivity and revenue. And this, I think, is a big gap in the work that we have to do. I want to skip to another topic here if I can, having to do with the cost of housing. We have a big problem in Minnesota with the proliferation, of private equity in housing. Here's what's happened in North Minneapolis, for example. One private equity firm swooped in and took up hundreds of single-family homes, bottom up off the market, turning them into permanent rentals. And that meant that families with roots in the community, dating back generations, now find it almost impossible to buy a home. And these big investors are absentee landlords in every sense. And of course, they're rewarded, to add insult to injury, they're rewarded with generous tax breaks for this. So I have a bill with Senator Warnock. It would be the Stop Predatory Investing Act, and this would prevent these big investors in single-family rental homes from deducting interest or depreciation. There's no reason, seems to me, to give these big investors taxpayer subsidies for doing something that is clearly hurting the challenges that we have with the severe housing shortage. Why, Mr. Kies, should the federal government be boosting private equity profits in this way by giving them this tax break?
So, Senator, assuming I'm confirmed, I'd be happy to examine your legislation and provide you any input that might be useful to you. It's obviously a decision that this committee and the Ways and Means Committee and that Congress as a whole will have to make judgments about. So I'd be happy to look at it if I'm confirmed into my position.
Well, I think that this tax break to private equity is an opportunity to do something about wasteful spending, and maybe even an opportunity to do something positive to lower housing costs for Americans. When private equity firms are able to exploit this market gap and artificially inflate prices and squeeze renters, it is bad for everybody. And I believe that this is an opportunity for us to actually do something to lower costs for housing for Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Smith. Before I go to Senator Cantwell, who's next, I just want to state once again that the TCJA, the tax cut we're talking about, $2.6 trillion of the $4.3 trillion is going to be a tax hike on people making less than $400,000. And another $700 billion will be a tax hike on our pass-through entities, think small businesses. So with that, we'll go on to Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kimmitt, you've been nominated to be the Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade. I'm a big supporter of the United States having an aggressive export strategy. I think the state of Washington, you could say it might be our geography, but we just learned a long time ago that being exporters was a really, really important concept. So you'll be working with, the nominee, Jacob Hellberg, at State, he would be in charge of economic growth and energy and environment. The two of you would be in charge of a export strategy for the United States. To me, it's hard to have an export strategy when you're in the middle of a trade war. I think the Obama administration had a goal of doubling exports in 4 years. They got, I think, about 80% there. I told them just claim victory and double down for the next 4 years. So, because that, to me, is one of the biggest GDP growth opportunities of the United States when 95% of consumers live outside of the United States. Focusing on exports as a big economic strategy, I think, is just exactly what our nation should be doing, getting those markets open. So do you think that that is a good goal to try to double exports in, say, a 4-year, 5-year period of time? And what would you do to make that strategy effective?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Absolutely, increasing exports to the maximum extent possible would be something I would be committed to working towards if confirmed. I think the Global Markets Unit at ITA plays an extremely crucial role in this export promotion through the U.S. field with offices all over the country, helping small and medium-sized businesses promote exports abroad, the Foreign Commercial Service in various markets throughout the world. So absolutely, I'm committed to working every day to promoting U.S. exports abroad and bringing market access to all industries.
What about alliance building? I've also been a big supporter of what I call a tech NATO. Why not just go get the biggest democracies and the biggest sophisticates in tech, like India and Japan and us, and basically just said these are the rules of the road. I mean, this is who you should buy from: people who don't have a government backdoor, people who have these kind of technology solutions, and maybe even incent the rest of the world instead of us spending money tearing out Huawei behind the fact. Do you think that kind of alliance building would be a priority?
Thank you for the question. I think certainly as countries come to work with us, the ones that have chosen to work with President Trump to fix global trade, certainly technology coordination with those countries is on the table and would be a vital goal of those discussions. And whether it's an alliance or on a bilateral basis, certainly creating tech arrangements with our trading partners that.
But you said something, when countries come to work with us. I'm trying to get a sense of whether you believe in alliance building as a key strategy for countering other people, that the alliance building is a way to, strengthen our hand. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I agree with that. Working with, calling it an alliance or however it's termed, working with a group of countries that are aligned in efforts to resist the Chinese infiltration in the tech space, absolutely.
Well, I'm saying set the stage, and my guess is more countries will join us. What do you think the biggest region is that we should focus on now? Do you think the Chinese are having too much effect in South America and that we could work on something that would open more U.S. doors in South America, for example?
I think every region of the world is important. I think South America certainly is important. I think looking at Southeast Asia in particular, also with countries that move out of China, but then move to local regional partners with China to as sort of a backdoor into the United States is certainly something that I also think demands prompt attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. I want to ask first of all, it was very nice to meet you in my office, and I really appreciate your history of public service and private sector involvement and willingness to come back to the public sector. So thank you, and to your family as well. One of the things that is a big issue here are the tariffs. I mean, we've had a lot of activity on that in the last couple of days, but one of the stated purposes of those tariffs is to raise money that would then be an offset to finance tax cuts that the president is pursuing. And your office would be publishing estimates, as I understand it, on tax revenues. Is that correct?
Certainly the Treasury Department does, as does the Joint Committee on Taxation, which provides the data that CBO uses as well.
All right, well, let me just ask, I think it's kind of obvious. We have no clue what the tariff policy ultimately is going to be at this point. Is that a fair statement?
I'm not, my office has, or if I'm confirmed, has no responsibility for tariffs, so it's not an area that I have any expertise in.
Right, I understand that, so I probably should have put it that way. But as a pay-for anything, whether it was for the tax cuts or for health care, unless there's real clarity about what revenue will come in from the tariffs, which would require real clarity as to what the tariffs were and what the duration of those tariffs would be. Would you agree with me that it would be impossible to provide a revenue estimate upon which Congress could rely that this revenue could be used as an offset for a tax cut or for any other program?
Well, Senator Welch, and I appreciated meeting with you, and I complimented your office on having the best coffee on Capitol Hill, which it does. So the role of the Treasury Department is in estimating tax provisions.
Right.
So it's really not an area that is, the expected revenues from tariffs is really not our responsibility.
No, I understand that, but you have incredible experience through your joint committee. You led the Joint Committee on Taxation. So, I mean, you know how these revenue estimates are incredibly important for policymakers. And you can't cook the books when you're joint, whether it was Democrats pushing you to come up with a number they preferred or Republicans. You had to deal with what your honest assessment was of the numbers. So I guess maybe I'm just making a point here, Mr. Chair, that if we don't know what the revenue, or if we don't know what the tariff policy is, then we can't look to the so-called revenues to be an offset for the program of any member's choice.
So Senator Welch, I would just comment on your observation. As head of the Joint Committee on Taxation, I was an equal opportunity person to be criticized by Democrats and Republicans for revenue estimates.
Just another thing very quickly. This debate we're having about the current baseline and current law, all the time you were at Joint tax? How did you, which approach did you use?
Well, and there's a very useful letter that Tom Barthold, who's the current head of the Joint Committee, sent to a number of senators. I think you might have been one of them, who lays out how the Joint Committee approaches revenue estimating based on the direction from the 74 Budget Act and the traditional scoring of the Joint Committee from the 74 Budget Act is the current law baseline. That is what they are directed to do. But the letter from Tom also points out that on multiple occasions, members of Congress have requested current policy baseline estimates, and
Right, and that decision is incredibly consequential in terms of the deficit. So let me go to Mr. Kimmitt. Thank you. I want to ask you about Vietnam. You know, we've really done great things in repairing, in having a good positive relationship with Vietnam. And it was announced that there was going to be a 46% tariff. I guess that was paused for 90 days. So we want fair trade with Vietnam, obviously. But isn't there a lot more at stake than just what the tariffs and the revenue would be in terms of our policy towards Vietnam and whether we maintain the positive trajectory we are on?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think Vietnam is a good example of sort of the situation we face, where I believe they export around $135 billion to the United States. We export about $13 billion. So we have an over $100 billion trade deficit with Vietnam.
But a lot of that is textiles, right?
I believe that's the case.
I mean, serious question. Do we seriously think that we're going to be able to reshore the textile industry within time to provide the shirts and the clothing that we need next year?
So the point with Vietnam that I was making more broadly is Vietnam run a budget deficit with a trade deficit with China, and so I think around $80 billion. So the point with Vietnam is we have a non-reciprocal arrangement with them, and so tariffs are one part of that, but certainly the non-reciprocal aspect incorporates other non-trade barriers as well.
I see my time is up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As President Trump increases taxes and increases prices by thousands of dollars on American families and potentially leads us into a recession, congressional Republicans are currently trying to ram through a massive tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. According to the Treasury Department, the entire bottom half of working families will see less than 8% of the benefits. We're all entitled to our own opinion, our own facts. The entire bottom half of working families will see less than 8% of the benefits. Meanwhile, Trump's trade war is estimated to cost families almost $4,000 per year, with costs rising on everything from strollers to clothing to groceries, yet another way of raising taxes. Instead of raising costs for families, we should give families a tax cut. And one of the best ways to do that is to increase the child tax credit. Mr. Kies, you're nominated to oversee tax policy for the Treasury Department. What will happen if Congress allows provisions regarding the child tax credit to just expire this year?
Senator Warnock, great question. And one of the points that I made earlier, which is worth repeating, is that allowing the 2017 Act provisions to expire at the end of 2025 would cause not only the standard deduction, but the child credit to go down in value. For a family of four, it's the difference between being able to deduct $34,000 for a family of four versus $23,000. So it's one of the reasons that the president has adamantly proposed extending and making permanent.
So it needs to be extended because it would be catastrophic for families. You agree, yes or no?
It would be a terrible outcome for families.
So yeah, right now the credit is only $2,000 per child right now.
That's correct.
With some working families receiving even less. If Congress doesn't act this year, then the CTC will be reduced to just $1,000. Now, I'm a father of 2 young children, proud of my 8-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son. They know everything already. But I know the CDC doesn't go far enough. Do you happen to know how much child care costs these days?
So, Senator, I have 2 daughters here that have my grandchildren, and so I'm well aware of what child care costs.
It's expensive. In Georgia, it's almost $12,000 per child for an infant. So it's unaffordable. That's unaffordable for many families. According to the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, nearly 1 in 3 families have had to leave or change jobs because of child care challenges. So we're stressing not only these families, but our economy by not providing a path for people to be able to pay for child care. Would you agree that by cutting middle-class taxes and helping cover the cost of raising a child, we could help more parents stay in the workforce?
And I think that's clearly part of the thinking of the president in extending the provisions that will otherwise expire at the end of 2025.
So if parents could work, it would help the economy, right?
Correct.
Would you agree with folks like Chairman Crapo and Vice President Vance that Congress should expand the child tax credit?
Senator Warnock, I have not been part of the Treasury Department in any way, so I haven't had any policy discussions. Right. But if I'm confirmed, those are obviously things that I would have.
I thought I heard you agree earlier that we should expand the child tax credit. Am I misunderstanding?
No, what I said was we should. Clearly it is the position of the president to extend. And Secretary Besson to extend the provisions that would otherwise expire, which includes the child.
I think we should expand the child tax credit.
I understand.
I'm proud of the fact that when we did it in 2021, we cut taxes, we cut poverty almost 50%. We lifted 165,000 Georgia children out of poverty. Right now, we've got 1 in 4 children in Georgia, 1 in 4, 680,000 children who are too poor to get the tax credit. Meanwhile, my colleagues are focused on giving a tax cut to millionaires and billionaires. I've got 1 in 4 children in Georgia who are too poor to get the child tax credit. And we are taxing families that are just at the threshold. We're taxing them into poverty while giving millionaires and billionaires a tax cut. Here's an idea. Tax cuts for people making over $400,000 per year will cost Americans $1.6 trillion, adding to the debt. Instead of cutting taxes for the wealthy, how about we invest that money into cutting taxes for working families struggling with high tariff costs instead? Would you support a bipartisan effort to expand support for working families by allowing a tax cut for the wealthiest people in America to expire, and instead using that money to cut taxes just for working families making under $400,000? Why don't we let tax cuts for the wealthiest in America expire and make sure we give working families a tax cut? Is that a good idea, yes or no?
So, Senator Warnock, in my role as if I'm confirmed as Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy, I don't make policy. I provide advice and analysis to the Secretary and the President. So my support or not support is really irrelevant.
As a grandfather, I hope you'll give them advice to expand the tax credit so that every child can have a chance. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we're going to give our colleagues across the aisle the opportunity to soon vote to make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. That saved every family in this country about $2,500. So we hope that they will join us in that permanence. Mr. Kimmitt, let me come to you first. When I'm around and about Tennessee, a lot of what I hear about from small businesses, and we have many, they're really concerned about China and how China is now trying to circumvent U.S. tariffs and do transshipment of goods, much of this through Vietnam. And they know that they're competing against cheap Chinese goods. And I want to know, in your role, when you're confirmed, what you're going to do to look at these unfair practices that are coming out of China and the adverse impact that has on many of our businesses, because it makes a difference and the price point and how they're able to grow and expand their business.
Thank you for the question, Senator. And absolutely, I agree that if confirmed, looking at this issue will require careful attention, whether it's looking at circumvention petitions or also there's an industry and analysis unit. And I think if confirmed, it will be important, particularly in this moment of trade recalibration, to have them focus on looking how trade flows are evolving. And I think the example I just used with your colleague on Vietnam in particular is Vietnam has a persistent trade deficit with China and a persistent trade surplus with us, and that's currently over $100 billion. And so as we discuss with Vietnam sort of root causes of our non-reciprocal trade arrangement, recognizing that the sort of diversion of Chinese products through Vietnam will absolutely be part of that discussion.
Okay, very good. Mr. Kies, to you, these businesses in Tennessee, about 75% of them are small businesses. And there is, when I talk about jobs in Tennessee, there's a formula that I use: less litigation plus less taxation plus less regulation equals more innovation and job creation. And what we have found is that most of these small businesses are pass-through entities. That's how they choose to organize themselves. And we know that these family-owned mom and pops, small businesses, working people, this is what has truly built this country. And what we've seen through the Biden years is just a slew of regulations, litigation, taxes that have hurt them, and really has increased IRS just meddling. And it has really funded a lot of leftist priorities. So talk to me about what Treasury can do to reduce red tape and reduce this burden on our Main Street small businesses instead of constantly giving them a roadblock.
So, Senator, a great question, and a point that I made earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again, is individual or unincorporated taxpayers, your small businesses, individuals are the backbone of the federal tax system.
Yes.
Of the $4.9 trillion that we collected in revenues in 2024, $4.1 trillion came from individual taxes and payroll taxes. Payroll taxes, which is also an important part of the tax burden on small businesses. It is absolutely clear that at Treasury and at the IRS, and if I'm confirmed, it will be my view that we need to strive to make dealing with the tax system as simple and efficient as possible. And Treasury will carefully follow the recent Supreme Court decision, which directed all regulatory agencies to not just put out a reasonable interpretation of statute, put up the best interpretation based on what the statute says. And certainly a keen focus of us, of the Treasury, if I'm confirmed, will be to address how that impacts individual taxpayers. And you raised pass-through businesses. Extending the 2017 expiring provisions includes an extremely important provision for pass-through businesses, which is the so-called 199 Cap A, which is the 20% deduction for pass-through businesses. Absolutely critical, huge impact on those small businesses that you're referring to.
Yes, and I hope you will, when confirmed, also look very closely at the OECD Pillar 2. U.S. companies are paying nearly 40% of this GMT, and it is not fair to U.S. businesses. The DSTs that are coming from some of these foreign governments are not fair to our businesses. This is something the prior administration got us into. It is something we need this administration to get us out of.
And as I'm sure you're aware, one of the first executive orders that the president signed was a commitment to follow the sovereignty of the U.S. tax system, to not be dictated to by foreign entities. I know that's an issue that Senator Crapo has been particularly outspoken about. So the administration's view in this whole area is very consistent with the views that have been expressed by your colleagues and yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we should deem that the kids get ice cream as soon as this is over with because they've been awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kimmitt, on Tuesday when Trade Representative Greer was before this committee, he told me that he was not worried about the recent market crashes. I would argue that that means not worried about the hardworking folks across this country losing thousands from their retirement. These are teachers, firefighters, as you know, other public servants that are seeing significant portions of their life savings being potentially wiped out due to what I would describe as a very reckless, thoughtless, and chaotic trade war from this administration. I remain concerned with the uncertainty these actions have injected into the market and their impact on families and small businesses in New Mexico and across the country. Trade Representative Greer during this hearing said he wanted to focus on Main Street. So let's talk about Main Street a little bit. Mr. Kimmitt, yes or no, do you think a chaotic and confusing trade war is good for Main Street?
Respectfully, Senator, to the extent that question presupposes a reckless trade policy currently undertaken, I disagree with that contention. And certainly, I think the President has been clear on the direction the country is going to take going forward.
Do you think what he is doing right now with those trade policies, however you would describe them, we can use your words, so you're comfortable in answering the question, are those good for Main Street?
I think if you look at the President's entire economic recovery strategy.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you think the President's trade policy is, are you comfortable with calling it that? Can I call it trade policy? You won't push back on me? What do you want to call it?
Trade policy, but.
Okay, do you agree that the President's trade policy is good for Main Street? Yes or no? It's a simple question.
Long term, absolutely.
Your answer is yes?
Yes, absolutely. Long term, the President, but the point I was trying to make.
Put that asterisk in there. That's okay. I appreciate that. Yes or no? Do you think Main Street businesses have been negatively impacted by the uncertainty created by President Trump's trade policy?
Again, I don't think it's a simple. The point I was making was that the tariff and trade strategy is part of a broader strategy that involves lower taxes, lower regulation, unleashing American energy, and it's part of a comprehensive economic recovery. If you look at indicators this morning, inflation is down, prices are down, and so certainly I think that the President has put us on a direction, absolutely, that the long-term benefit is part of that strategy.
Mr. Kimmitt, would you agree with President Trump's assessment as he spoke to the American people during his joint session that the American people are going to feel a little pain and that's okay during all of this? Do you agree with that, or do you disagree that it's okay for the American people to feel some pain?
I'm not familiar with that specific statement.
Did you watch the President's joint address?
The joint address, the State of the Union?
Yeah, it's only been 10 weeks or so. Did you watch it?
I did watch it. I don't recall that specific statement.
You don't remember what he said?
I don't recall the specific statement you're referring to.
You might want to go back and read it. He's the guy that picked you to do this job, I think. President might be offended that you didn't remember what he said during his joint address. Yes or no, will you stand up to this President if his economic policies that you will have responsibility with negatively impact Main Street businesses?
If confirmed, I absolutely commit to advising to the extent is appropriate on those issues.
To ensure that economic policy does not negatively impact small business?
If confirmed, I absolutely will work every day in my role to support small businesses to the fullest extent possible.
I appreciate that. I'm not hearing a direct agreement with that line of questioning, but every time that I've heard one of President's nominees come before us, I've asked them similar questions. If the policies they're responsible for have a negative impact on whatever that policy is in that space, if they'll just stand up and speak up to the President, I certainly hope that we all would, because I think we're on the same page there. There's a difference between right and wrong. Predominantly, we have the same values. We just have a different way of getting there with some of those goals. So I certainly hope that's an area that we can work on together. Mr. Kies, I just wanted to follow up to the question that Mr. Warnock asked. If I heard you correctly, your responsibility when confirmed will be to advise the Secretary and the President in matters of tax policies in this space. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Will you advise for increasing middle-class tax cuts to the Secretary to President Trump?
So what I would strongly encourage President Trump to do is to work as hard as possible with the Congress to extend the 2017 provisions, which contain, as I pointed out earlier, significant tax benefits for middle-income taxpayers. And not to be repetitive, but the importance of extending the standard deduction and the child credit, which largely benefit middle-income taxpayers, is absolutely essential.
Mr. Kies, when confirmed, based on the 2017 levels of the President's tax policy, will you advise to increase the middle-class tax cuts that go to people making $400,000 or less a year in that provision, yes or no?
So my responsibility is to follow out the policy of the administration, assuming I'm confirmed, and the Secretary, and it would be dependent on what their views were with respect to those issues.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kies, you just testified, Mr. Warnock, that's your responsibility to advise.
And advise is a very general term.
Is advising only telling him what he's doing is good?
No.
Or is advising him, giving him options and advising him what you believe through your expertise, going back to the 86 policy, the work that you have done, the reputable career that you have had? I don't agree with all of it with what you've done in it, but nonetheless, my colleagues certainly do. You've given presidents good advice, and you've not always told them what you're doing is just peachy keen. You've given them balls and strikes, if you will, and they need to make sure that they understand that. That's all that I'm simply asking in this space.
And I understand that, Senator.
Would you advise the president to increase middle-class tax cuts?
So, Senator, again, I haven't been part of the Treasury Department in any way, so I'm not in a position to be able to.
I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time, Mr. Kies.
Thank you. Senator Tillis.
I thank the senator from New Mexico for going over a little bit, because I may have not had a chance to speak. Thank you.
You got in under the wire.
Ran it down to the wire. I'm going to be quick. Congratulations to both of you. Mr. Kies, you and I have known each other for a long time, and we grew up in the same firm at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you've got a great resume. I'm going to get to a few questions for you. Mr. Kimmitt, congratulations on going to Duke. It's a shame you didn't have the grades to go to Chapel Hill, but maybe your children will. No, in all seriousness, you guys have extraordinary resumes, and I look forward to supporting both of you. Mr. Kies, let's start with you. Just one thing quickly. You know, we're going through now the priorities for TCJA, and what I hope is substantially a reauth without a whole lot more in it. Now, we're going to have those debates here, but tell me a little bit about your opinion on the one provision I'm particularly interested in from your perspective is the foreign-derived intangible income. Do you think that that's something that's worth maintaining in TCJA?
Absolutely, and the foreign-derived intangible income provision, along with the lowering of the top corporate rate to 21%, were specifically designed to encourage U.S. companies to stay in the United States, to bring their IP to the United States.
And we saw it we saw a significant immediate reaction, didn't we?
And it completely terminated inversion transactions, which you're well familiar with, where U.S. companies became foreign companies. I'm not aware that we've had a single inversion transaction since 2017, and the FDII provision was a key part of that.
Good. Now I want to ask you a question that's less likely to be comfortable. I don't know why we are killing ourselves to find $500 billion for non-pro-growth tax policy. I'm not debating the validity of no tax on tips or no tax on Social Security or no tax on overtime. What I'm debating is why we need to make the task of reauthorizing TCJA so much more difficult by discussions related to the $500 billion estimated pay-for, and one of those pay-fors being effectively increasing the corporate tax rate by changing the sea salt deduction. In a perfect world, if I were advising a client, as you and I have, and you specifically on tax matters, me on business matters, what is the case other than fulfilling a political promise for including all of that non-pro-growth tax policy in this first tranche while we're trying to get the economy moving again to create the revenue that allows us to do a lot of tax reform like we did in North Carolina after we got businesses reginned again?
So as I pointed out to other questioners on both sides of the aisle, I have not had any role at the Treasury Department. I'm not a
that's
consultant.
okay. I didn't even, it's a tough question to ask an old friend. You and I have known each other a long time. But I do believe that this is an area where we should advise the president that clearly we all stand here to support the fulfillment of his campaign promises. It just seems to me that if we settled down some of the uncertainty in trade and made it very clear that a substantially similar version of TCJA was going to be passed, we would see an economic response that probably makes an economic activity that makes the pay for these non-pro-growth policies better, and then maybe even a fairer implementation. Mr. Kimmitt, you may benefit from not even me to ask you a question on tariff. I went into that a little bit with Mr. Greer yesterday. But I'll leave you with this. Over 3 years, this is why I think we should look at more tax relief for people who are struggling the most. Over a 3-year period, there was Tom Tillis, the waiter, lived in the same trailer park over that 3-year period. There was Tom Tillis, the waiter, that worked at a restaurant that was like a Denny's, okay? But I was a male, and it was 1977, and a novelty. I made a lot of tips. I mean, I can remember $80, $90 shifts, which was a lot of money back then. So then Tom Tillis went from being a waiter to 3 years later being a warehouse worker. And under the president's proposal, Tom Tillis, the waiter, will get tax relief, but Tom Tillis, the warehouse worker, won't. So it just seems to me that there should be a way to kind of come up with a fair tax relief strategy that's not pro-growth, but the right thing to do for struggling people. And I just feel like we do that when we get the uncertainty out of the markets with the work that I expect Mr. Kimmitt will do in advising on trade, and that you will do advising on trade and just pro-growth policies first. So I just leave that for your consideration. Don't expect a response. And Mr. Kimmitt, I will just say in closing, since I'm last to speak, I'm glad to see the president do the pause. I think it makes sense. Doesn't matter to me whether it was part of the strategy or a reaction to maybe some unexpected outcomes over the past week or two. It's irrelevant to me. What is relevant to me is getting an order flow or a deal flow going pretty quickly with the most important trading partners, particularly those that we have relationships that go beyond just trade. Get that deal flow in and prove to the American business and the American economy that after 90 days, if you start building that pipeline now and making it visible, I'm thinking about Vietnam as an example. We know what they're prepared to do. We know we have 200 Boeing jets on the line, $5 billion in LNG. They're ready to invest. They want to go to zero tariffs. We need more of those stories happening sooner, and we've got to get that order flow and deal flow going. Both of you guys are going to be in critically important positions to make what President is doing that I'm behind on trade and taxes enormously successful and getting this economy back on track. I look forward to supporting you all's nomination.
We have concluded the first round. Senator Wyden would like to ask one more question, and then we will go to our wrap-up. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've got a Bloomberg article here. Price hikes are already rolling in from tariff-hit businesses. Mr. Kimmitt has repeatedly said somehow there is this dramatic set of price reductions going on out there. We'll hold the record open. I'm very interested in anything that you have that would speak to specific industries there that are seeing price relief. The last question I am asking, Mr. Chairman, reflects the fact that it is very hard to sort out who in the Trump administration makes these crucial decisions with respect to trade and tariffs. And I want to ask Mr. Kimmitt a question because it relates to what happens if he is confirmed. As I understand it, Mr. Kimmitt, if confirmed, you would report directly to the Commerce Secretary, Mr. Lutnick. Is that right?
Yes, Ranking Member, I believe that's correct.
Okay. So in defending this set of tax hikes, these tariffs, Donald Trump has said the pain is worth it to bring back manufacturing jobs. That's what the president has said. Senator Lutnick, the person you would be reporting to, if you're confirmed, seems to have another view. He said, and I quote, "The army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing will come back to America." Now, that struck me as kind of baffling, but Mr. Lutnick continued, and he said it's, quote, "going to be automated." Now, you just told me you'd be reporting to Mr. Lutnick. Your office, I gather, is next door. Why is it, in your view, the goal of the Trump massive import taxes to have robots building iPhones in the United States? Where does such a thing fit in? Because it just leaves me kind of gobsmacked.
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Wyden. I believe, as I think about this issue, certainly the investment in the United States will be modern investment in modern manufacturing, and automation will certainly be a part of that. I can't speak, of course, for Secretary Lutnick, but I think as you read those statements to me, I think he might be referring to the sort of servicing.
Do you agree with what he said, that that's really what this is all about? We'd have massive import taxes to have robots building iPhones in America. Is that why we're taking all this pain? Why I'm going to hear at all my town hall meetings about how everybody's 401k is hurting and people don't know where their suppliers are and prices keep going up? What is the point of this bizarre concept?
So I believe that the comment might be in reference to the unprecedented levels of investment companies like Apple are making in the United States. And so I'm not familiar with the specific quote you read, but I think a modern manufacturing will include significant automation, and that will, of course, require a skilled workforce to help implement that.
Well, inside that verbiage, what you're telling my constituents is they should take a big hit now. Right now, they're going to get hit with more taxes, because that's what a tariff is, in order to have robots building iPhones in the United States. They don't want to take that hit because they want to have those dollars to have some certainty and predictability so that they can make investments here in America that are going to be winners for them and their workers for the long term. And I don't see this policy from Mr. Lutnick being anything that's going to provide real opportunities to the people who are going to come to my town hall meetings and say to me, "Hey, we've got something we want you to do about these tariffs." And I'm going to give them a chance to say what they want, and they're going to say, "Get rid of them." And that's exactly what I'm going to try to do when I get back, because we showed some progress with respect to Canada, but we're looking at 180 other of these, and I don't think this is in the interest of the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And Mr. Kimmitt and Mr. Kies, I want to thank you again for appearing before us today. That will conclude the questioning. You are both clearly qualified to serve in the respective positions to which you have been nominated, and I look forward to voting in favor of both of your nominations. I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. With that, I remind my colleagues that the deadline for submitting any questions for the record is 5 p.m. on April 15th. That's Tuesday, April 15th. And the Finance Committee stands adjourned.
President, could we have order?
Order, please.
Mr. President, there's been a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth in the mainstream media about President Trump's common sense immigration enforcement agenda. That's one of the reasons he got elected on November the 5th, is because the American people were fed up with open borders, the 70,000 Americans who died of fentanyl poisoning, and not to mention all the criminals who came across the border along with everybody else. But to listen to some of my Democratic colleagues talk, one would think that Kristi Noem is deporting grandmothers. Well, this couldn't be further from the truth. So I'm going to take just a minute to correct the record, to talk about exactly what is happening. The Trump administration is rightly carrying on one of the most basic functions of the government, and that's to keep our people safe. This isn't rocket science. This isn't partisan warfare. In order to keep the American people safe, we need to keep criminals and gangs off our streets. And that's exactly what the Trump administration is doing. The Department of Homeland Security recently announced they've made more than 32,000 enforcement arrests in just 50 days. 32,000. Now, this is nearly as many arrests as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, made in the entirety of fiscal year 2024, when border crossings and gotaways were at an all-time high. Obviously, this was not a priority for the Biden administration, and we're all living with the consequences. Of these arrests that have been made under Secretary Noem, nearly half of them have been convicted criminals, and others with final orders of deportation. These are people who either were criminals and did not want to appear in front of law enforcement, who were apprehended, or people who claimed asylum or some other legal benefit and lost their case and are under final orders of deportation, but were allowed to remain in the country under the Biden administration. Of these arrests that have been made under Secretary Noem, as I said, nearly half were convicted criminals. 1/3 of them have pending criminal charges. Nearly 1,200 of them were criminal gang members, and 39 were known as suspected terrorists. Now, the Department of Homeland Security isn't carrying out this critical mission alone. This is a whole of government approach, as it should be. The Department of Justice is partnering with the Department of Homeland Security on a new interagency initiative to crack down on international organized crime, known as Operation Take Back America. International gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua have been wreaking havoc, death, and destruction in communities across America. MS-13, for those who are not familiar with that particular gang, is reputed to be the most dangerous gang on the planet. It's composed primarily of Salvadorian criminal aliens and has 30,000 members around the world, including 10,000 here in the United States. Their motto is, quote, kill, rape, control. And as I said, they are one of the largest and most dangerous street gangs in the United States. Many of their leaders are currently imprisoned in El Salvador for crimes like murder, kidnapping, and extortion. However, some on that side of the aisle or in the mainstream media have actually gone so far as to describe MS-13 as Boy Scouts in comparison with the destruction and devastation that's happened at the hands of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang known for human trafficking, kidnapping, and drug trafficking. This particular Venezuelan gang has been particularly aggressive in my home state of Texas, where the Department of Public Safety has arrested more than 40 of the gang's suspected members just last week. In New York, Trinidad Aragua has been recruiting gang members from New York migrant shelters, increasing cell phone robbery activities and trafficking stolen phones back to their headquarters in South America. But the reason this gang became the topic of dinner tables across America was that they were responsible for the murders of both Laken Riley and a fellow Texan, Jocelyn Nungary. I can't imagine anyone would be anything except relieved that the Trump administration has prioritized removing these gang members from our country. The Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice have shown an ability and a commitment to lock up these dangerous international terrorists at breakneck speed. As part of this initiative, a recently created task force in Virginia, just across the river, arrested 247 individuals in 2 weeks. So this just is not a phenomenon in border states like mine. These people are embedded around the country, literally in every state. Among these arrests in Virginia was Henry Jose Villatoro Santos, one of MS-13's top gang leaders, who was charged in this instance with illegal gun possession. Another MS-13 leader, Jose Vargas Escobar, was arrested in New York just last week. This particular dangerous criminal was most recently arrested for his alleged involvement with 11 murders. But this was not his first run-in with the law. He was previously arrested and deported back in 2018, but due to the Biden administration's open border policies, he was able to illegally enter the country again. The Department of Homeland Security recently announced that in less than a week, ICE has arrested 68 gang members of the Venezuelan gang that I mentioned a moment ago. With Secretary Noem and Attorney General Bondi at the helm, I think we can all sleep more easily knowing that law enforcement is finally able to do their job, which is to enforce the law, something the Biden administration seemed positively allergic to. As a result, our homeland will be safer and more secure. The Trump administration is committed to dismantling these international criminal organizations that have created so much havoc and heartache throughout our country. It should be obvious and universal that keeping our citizens safe is not a partisan exercise. It's nothing more than common sense, and it's actually the responsibility of government to actually enforce the laws that Congress passes. Refusing to arrest and lock up criminals who never should have been in the country in the first place will go down in history as one of the biggest mistakes the Biden administration and Democrats have ever made. The Trump administration is rightly correcting the terrible mistakes of the Biden administration. The American people deserve to live in a country where they don't have to be fearful for their safety. And that's what they voted for last November the 5th. Parents should not have to worry about their children being seen or heard, never seen or heard from again, simply because they go for a jog like Laken Riley did. Far too many innocent people have lost their lives because of the Biden administration's open border policies and failure to keep criminals and gangs out. It is incomprehensible to me that the President of the United States refused to enforce the laws and resulted in so much pain and misery and heartache among so many people in this country. The Trump administration, by contrast, arrests and deportation of criminal migrants here is part of the solution, not part of the problem. Mr. President, I'm confident the American people know nonsense when they hear it, even when it's broadcast over mainstream media. And the fear-mongering that we hear on the left about the Trump administration's efforts to keep all Americans safe are nothing more than that. Mr. President, I have 6 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They've been approved by both the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted. The senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, when it comes to new tax breaks for billionaires, Republicans are going to work around the clock, stay through the night. But when it comes to stopping Trump's trade war for good, when it comes to stopping a tax increase aimed squarely at working families, when it comes to stopping the complete uncertainty that is chipping away at confidence in our economy, most Republicans can't be bothered. Never mind that Trump is now pushing us into a recession and sending the markets whipsawing back and forth every time he tweets. Trump may be retreating now from some of his most outlandish tariffs, but make no mistake, his trade war is far from over. First of all, he is still taxing goods from every country across the board at 10% at least. That means higher prices and serious pain for families and small businesses across our country. Not to mention, he is only escalating this boneheaded trade war with China with a 145% tariff. There is no question we are in fierce competition with China. I chaired a committee hearing focused on this. We need to be competing to win, but that is not what Trump is doing. Do my Republican colleagues understand it is not setting America up for success to launch an all-out trade war with the second largest economy in the world on a whim? And while people might be temporarily relieved by this so-called pause on the even higher tariffs, the fact of the matter is that Trump is only delaying them. The threat of even larger taxes that American families simply cannot afford is still like a time bomb set to blow up our economy in 90 days. And if Congress does not defuse that economic bomb, there is a real threat that it will blow up balance sheets for small businesses and farms, college savings accounts for our students, and your retirement savings, along with a lot more. And I have to emphasize the uncertainty, the constant, by the hour reversal of federal policy, that alone is already causing massive harm. How on earth are you supposed to build your business if your costs skyrocket on a tweet? How are you supposed to plan for retirement when the president is sending your 401k on a roller coaster ride every time he's in a bad mood? How are we ever going to rebuild trust with our trading partners across the world when the message the United States is sending right now is that our trade relationships are built on sand, and there is no logic to the tariffs the United States will impose? How are they supposed to feel good about negotiating with a country where one man can totally burn down the economy and Congress will not lift a finger to stop him? Instead of building stronger trade agreements, Trump is pushing our partners away and pushing them towards striking deals with China and our other adversaries. And mark my words, this chaotic chapter is not over, as much as Republicans want to pretend otherwise. I have been hearing from small businesses who are in an absolute panic because of Trump's tariffs threats. Car dealerships are seeing sales plummet because Trump is sending prices higher. Restaurants are trying to stock up on any goods they can because their ingredients are about to get more expensive. Our growers are bracing for rising operating costs and retaliatory tariffs and that will drive up the prices at our grocery stores. 10% across-the-board tariffs are still bad enough to ruin families' finances. And while Republicans are showing with their own actions that they couldn't care more about shoveling trillions, and yes, that is trillions, at billionaires, Trump has said in his own words, that he, quote, couldn't care less about the pain his tariffs are already causing for Americans. I'm not kidding. He actually said that about automobile tariffs. This is what happens when you only have billionaires in charge. Because, of course, Trump doesn't care if the car prices go up by a couple $1,000s. Of course, Elon Musk doesn't care if your groceries are getting more expensive at the same time Republicans are cutting nutrition programs, by the way. Of course, the richest people in the world don't care if your nest egg is crushed or your small business shutters or your house gets foreclosed on or your kid can't go to college. Billionaires are going to be fine. After all, they're still getting a tax cut. But I wasn't set here to fight for billionaires. Actually, none of us were. We're here to fight for families back home, and they are already starting to get crushed by Trump's tariffs, and they are bracing for impact if Trump doubles down in 90 days. Or who knows, maybe Trump changes his mind again tomorrow. It's anyone's guess at this point, which is, by the way, the problem here. And another thing, if this is about American manufacturing, tell us, why are plants and new investments being canceled? Why has Trump been freezing and outright canceling grants that we passed to support chips manufacturing or clean energy and more, killing American jobs? And let's keep in mind, these tariffs affect building and construction too. Trump is actually making it more expensive to build those factories in America. And don't forget, President Trump is still promising more tariffs. He said this week, he wants to put tariffs on medicine. Well, I got to tell you one thing I have never heard, not in a single meeting, not once in my entire career as a senator, is someone saying, gee, I really wish my prescriptions were more expensive. Drug costs are out of control. Families are already skipping meals or rationing doses. There are real stakes here. There's real damage already happening in this country because of Trump's new taxes and this ongoing chaos. We here cannot ignore this harm, especially when the threat is still there. When you're putting out a fire, you don't say, oh great, it's smaller, I'm done. You keep going until the fire is put out. This fire is still raging. And if we don't act here, folks back home are the ones who are going to get burned. And before too long, in 90 days, we could see even worse price increases come roaring back. Because, let's be real, Trump has no exit strategy. That much is already painfully clear. It was clear when he announced tariffs that were calculated using ridiculous math. It was clear when he repeatedly doubled down on these threats against our allies. And it was clearer than ever when he backtracked on the most absurd tax hikes. This does not have the hallmarks of a grand strategy, and it's all the more reason why Congress, us, needs to step in and put this mess to an end. Trump's trade war is all pain and no plan. We could be passing legislation right here to reject this chaos. Here's what everyone, my colleagues, my constituents, the markets around the world all need to understand. This chaos will not be over for good unless we, here in Congress, vote to end it. Because whatever Trump tweets today, he can reverse tomorrow. Whatever deal he may strike one minute, he may rip up the next. We know this about him. He proves it at every opportunity. We here in Congress, we are the off-ramp if Republicans decide to be. We are the check on presidential power. We are the kill switch for Trump's trade war. And by the way, we're about to be out of town for 2 weeks. I cannot understand why any Republican would want to leave this business unfinished, want to leave this economic time bomb ticking, want to hand over our constitutionally granted power to impose tariffs. But I can tell you, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be going across my home state of Washington, raising this alarm. I'm going to be meeting with families, small businesses, people who are paying the cost of Trump's new tax increase and who are going to see their world turned upside down if we do not take action to stop this from getting worse. And when we get back here in 2 weeks, you can bet your bottom dollar, I will lift those stories up as high as I can. I will call for action as loud as I can. And I'm going to keep a bright and burning spotlight on all of the chaos Trump has caused. And I will keep the pressure on all of our colleagues. I will not let Republicans off the hook on this. We can put an end to this. The costs are just going to be adding up. The carnage is going to continue to pile higher. How long do you want to wait? My vote, not one more second. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.